Hello and welcome back to the Collin Cadmus Podcast. Today I'm joined by Joe Brown. Joe graduated from the University of Arizona in 2014 and then joined the sales team at SinglePlatform, where we worked together with Lee Rozins, Adam Liebman, and Wiley Cerilli, who I interviewed in previous episodes. Joe rose through the ranks at SinglePlatform from full-cycle salesperson to sales manager and trainer before moving into a director of sales role at a health tech company, Simplifeye, in 2017, until starting his most recent and current venture as founder and CEO of DearDoc, where they're reinventing the way new patients meet their doctor. Starting a tech company as a salesperson is no easy feat because we generally don't know how to build the thing we want to sell. Joe is one of the few salespeople who successfully figured out how to make this happen. So today we're going to focus specifically on what he's built at DearDoc, how he did it, and what sales lessons he's learned along the way. If you're in tech sales and dream of someday starting your own company, you'll want to listen through to the end of this one. Before we get started, if you're watching on YouTube, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave us a comment if you have questions or feedback. If you're joining us from Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please drop us a review and let us know what you think of the episode. This is much appreciated. Without further ado, let's dive in and get his thoughts. Joe, thanks for joining me and welcome to the show.
Very, very excited to be here. Very excited.
Likewise. It's been, I've been watching your journey from afar across LinkedIn, Instagram, and what have you. And I've been, I think, accumulating a lot of questions that I've been eager to ask you all this time. So I'm glad we finally have the chance. For those who are tuning in, I've been asking a series of mostly the same questions over the last 15 plus episodes, but we're going to change it up today. I think some of those topics will naturally work their way into the dialogue here, but I want to really learn how you did this, right? I mean, I have personally wanted to start my own company. I think many of us do, especially if you become a top salesperson at a SaaS company, especially like an early stage startup. I think it's kind of natural to explore the thought of like, could I just do this myself, right? Like I can sell the thing. If I can build something, I kind of have figured out, or maybe if you're even not a top salesperson, maybe you've moved into management. I think that's probably more where some of this happens is you've gone through the ranks, you know how to sell, you know how to hire, you know how to train, you know how to build a team. And you're like, crap, like there's just sort of one missing link here, which is like a product. And if I could get one of those and maybe a little bit of capital to hire some people, maybe I could do this, right? And so, I tried to start my own when I left doctor.com, and I had no clue what I was doing. It was a horrible, just a waste of 8 months, pitched a bunch of angel investors, some VCs, had a great idea, but had no technical co-founder and really I just didn't really know where to get started. And so I had this idea and I put together a PowerPoint and tried to sort of mimic some of the things I remember learning from Wiley of like sort of try to make it look like it exists before it exists, all this type of stuff. But basically, I didn't get laughed out the door. I mean, most of the investors that I pitched were like, hey, it's a great idea. You seem awesome. We'd love to work with you. Like, come back to me when you get to the point of like having a few customers, right? And I'm thinking to myself, well, like, I don't know how to build this. Like, I need your money. Like, I need to somehow get an MVP built, and then I can definitely sell it. Like, I'm really confident in that. And, if we can't, we pivot a little bit and we'll get there. But getting to that point is really hard, right? Like I kind of came to the conclusion after 8 months of trying that I need a technical co-founder. I need someone who can build the thing and I can sell the thing. And then together we can get to that sort of starting point where we've got some customers, we've got some revenue, and then we can go to some angel investors and get some money to just add a few full-time hires and, really grow the thing. But at that point, I was 8 months in, I was getting eager to start earning money again. And Adam had made an intro to Aircall. And I just sort of felt like, all right, I should probably just get back to doing what I know best and maybe rethink this, later down the road. And maybe I'm there now. I don't know. I'm consulting and all that sort of stuff, but this has lingered in the back of my head. And I think it does probably for many people who are listening. So without further ado, I want to dive in here. And so I've laid out a series of questions and some of them might overlap a little bit. But let's start here. Let's start with, because I think this is like, we could start with like, what is DearDoc? How'd you come up with the idea and all that sort of stuff? And I think we'll work that sort of in. But let's start with what I think people are going to be most eager to understand as a starting point, which is like, what is DearDoc and how did you sort of raise initial funding? How did you think about that? Did you go sort of bootstrap? Did you go VC route? I have no clue, by the way. I think I have maybe, I could guess, but I really don't know. So I've just watched your success. I've watched you hiring people. Take it away. I don't even want to throw a guess out there.
Yeah. So the whole story you're talking about like takes me back to like the very early days of DearDoc, and even like a year or 2 years before I even started.
And it's
So
been
like
6 years, by the way, right? For everyone who's listening.
exactly right. Yeah. So in February it'll be 6 years since we started DearDoc. So one of the questions was, did we bootstrap or raise money? So we bootstrapped it. So we haven't raised any money today. I've done this totally bootstrapped. We have 145 people on the team. We have over 5,000 doctors' offices that use DearDoc on a regular basis. We have about 100,000 patients per day that use DearDoc. So about 3 million patients a month that interact with DearDoc technology in some capacity. How did we do it? So the funding thing is an interesting thing because when in the early days, like, so I've had some bad experiences with just raising money, investors, and not personally, but like been part of companies. The company I was at just before I started DearDoc had some issues with investors, and actually the founder and CEO was no longer their own company that they started, and it kind of that happened to me. My dad was the same way. My dad was a CEO of his own company, and then investors said, "Hey, this is not working anymore," and actually ousted him at his own company. So I already have this like background of kind of this. Well, let's listen. Will we raise money at some point in DearDoc's life cycle? There's a chance. We're not going to out it completely, but in the early days, I wanted to avoid it. But at the same time, having investors made it seem like, okay, my idea is good. Like you almost want this like third party validation that like,
Yeah.
is my idea good or not? And like if I had investors and like people could actually believe me that it's actually good, if I can convince them to give me some money, even if it's like a small amount. But how did I fund it? So I took no investors. I had meetings with people, and I had people literally tell me to my face that no doctor is going to pay you money to have like a robot talk to their patients. And I'll tell you kind of DearDoc's main product when we started was like we built the first ever HIPAA compliant AI chat for doctors' websites that integrated directly into their patient management system. So it could like schedule appointments, go into the appointment system, and all this stuff. And
Do you know what's wild about that, by the way? When I said I tried to start my own company. I don't know if you know this. You definitely don't, unless I had told you. Because the only people who know about it are the investors I pitched. But it was called TalkPad, and it was HIPAA compliant text messaging for healthcare. So similar, not to be on their website. The idea was to sort of get the front office staff off the phone so much.
Yes.
But yeah, that was the idea. So I understand the space for sure.
The idea came from one day when I was Simplifeye. The founder came to me and he goes, "Hey, I bought this thing called Intercom, and can you go to the app and download it on your phone and answer some things when people come to the website?" And I said, "Sure." And so that same night that we got Intercom set up, I would have the app. It was like 8 o'clock at night, eating dinner with friends, and people were messaging on the website about like, "What is your integrations?" And I was like, "That's a good question. What's your name and phone number? I'll have somebody reach out." And gave us a name and phone number, and I'd send that to the sales team. By the next morning, we were doing very fast transactional sales process. That was closed by 10:30 in the morning the next morning. And
So this was a customer at Simplifeye who just was like needed some help setting up intercom on the website?
No. I had set up Intercom on the website. I had set it up on my phone. A customer went to Simplifye's website to ask questions on there.
Oh, from Simplifye's website. Got it.
So I'm the person answering the chats. Like it's me.
Right.
I'm the one that's there. And when we looked at the data over the last 30 days, like having a chat widget on the website, because we were full outbound. We had no inbound. We weren't doing any Google ads, nothing. But we 4x'd our inbound leads by using that little chat widget. And I remembered that's how the whole thing got started. It was that with a combination of looking that no other Intercom wasn't HIPAA compliant. I don't know if they are today. They weren't HIPAA compliant. So we kind of tied in what they were doing. And I don't want to go to, I know it's not, we can talk about the product later if we want to get into detail. But how I funded it was when I was at a point in the year before I started the company, I had made a decision that I wanted to do it. I wanted to start a company. And I also made a decision on like how much money I wanted to save that year. And it happened to be that the way I had set up my commission plan, like they had no idea how well I was going to perform as like a head of sales at Simplifeye. And so we overperformed significantly, recruited some really great people, did really well. And I like was living off of like 1/4 or 1/5 my income. And I saved my money and I saved my money and I saved money to the point where like I had enough money saved where I could have gone, I think it was like 18 months living in New York City, paying rent and like not having to do anything. So I'd saved a lot of money. And so, I was meal prepping every single meal. I was not spending, like, I would not take an Uber you can never see me catching an Uber. I would only take city bikes everywhere. I wouldn't even pay for a subway. I was like, just not spending any money on anything. And that's how I originally started it. So like I was trying to talk to investors, but I didn't really I was like half in, half out. I was like, I want to do it because I want to get the validation, but then like I don't really want to do it. And so it's so I ended up just saying, all right, I'm just gonna go on and do this thing myself. And then the one part of that is like, how do you build the product that way if you're a salesperson? And so the original part of this, the first initial set of the product was just like a third party dev shop that we worked to build the original product. But that was the piece of it. And then eventually over time.
Oh, so it wasn't a white label. For some reason, I thought maybe there would have been like a white label MVP version of this. But I guess HIPAA compliant maybe made it hard to find that.
No, so that's another part of that I would suggest is the following products we offered. Besides that kind of main one, we did white label some products in the earlier days. We still actually do today. Some of the products we offer today are white labeled. We haven't built fully in house. But like
for doctors, it works, right? Because like what they really need is an expert to sort of facilitate. So a lot of this stuff is already built, but it's too complex for them to go out and sort of figure out how to like get it set up or what to use. And so there is a lot of opportunity just in the healthcare space alone, just sort of bridging that gap. But that wasn't the game plan, right? You wanted to build your own thing.
For sure. Yeah. And then and then once we had enough money invested. So like the way that I did it early, so I had the cash to build like initial product. Then I also like partnered with a few other companies to sell like 2 or 3 products. I found that like at SinglePlatform, we had sold 1 product. And even at Simplifeye, we had sold 1 product. And I realized like how difficult that is to actually grow and scale and only having 1 product to sell. You can grow much faster by offering multiple products because you have a customer who's willing to buy more from you. You should be able to give them more value and charge more for it. So
and doctors, I remember like when they find someone they like working with on the tech side, that sort of becomes their go-to person, and they start calling you with every technical question. Like, so I could see how sort of the opportunity just presents itself. It was similar at Doctor.com. Is like they just started asking us to do things, so we just found ways to sell that stuff.
Yeah, and then when we started in the early days, we brought in a few salespeople that I knew really closely that I'd worked with at multiple companies, and they were commission only. And so didn't have to put up any upfront cash, and they would commission only. They had obviously a high commission number they can make. They did really, really well. And then once we had enough money to then like rebuild it in-house, we hired it. Now we have a whole engineering team who rebuilt the original product, and it's totally brand new and it's amazing and it's beautiful. But that's how we funded it in the early days. And the first
how did you? Sorry, I was just going to ask how you convinced them to go commission only. Was that a tough sell, or was it like, hey, you're going to get some equity and we're going to build this thing together, and you just had to find people who were sort of down for that type of a scenario?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think equity is definitely valuable. So giving equity, and these were people that I had built relationships with in the past. So like I'd worked with them at other companies. And so they knew me, they trusted me. They knew that if they worked with me, every time they've worked with me and worked alongside me, they've always made more money. And the same thing was true when they came and joined DearDoc, they ended up making more money. So I built those relationships for many, many years, even before starting the company. So by the time I said I was starting a company, it was almost like, where do I join? How do I join? It's like, all right, this is how we're going to do this. And these are some really, really great people. And then, one of the things I did early on too, that was really smart is I brought on, he was a VP of finance. Because listen, I think sometimes as salespeople, like I'm interesting because like most salespeople I think are not the most frugal individuals, but we were like exceptionally pushing hard by the team to like close sales. I was doing well, the team was doing well, but I was also extremely frugal. I wasn't like spending a lot of money, and I wanted to keep that same like culture at DearDoc. So one of our first core values we had was stay broke. It was like, we're going to make a lot of money, but we want to live as if we're broke. Like we want to like,
I like
never
that.
like first class. We're never doing these types of things.
It teaches people. Sorry, go ahead.
It teaches people personal finance, all that stuff. Like I told all of you, like save your money, like don't spend it. Like keep your money. You worked hard for it. But at the same time, don't be like complacent. Just because you see a lot of money in your bank account, don't be like, all right, I'm good now. Like you can't be complacent. We got to set numbers. We have to know exactly what we want to hit.
Yeah.
I brought on early on a VP of finance who was a guy I actually knew we met the first day of high school when we were 14 years old, and I had him join on as VP of finance because I wanted to make sure like, hey, I think we're going to make some money here. I think we're going to do well. I got to make sure like we're spending it in the right places. We're keeping these places. And so it ended up being that this guy, his name is Danny McGregor. He joined us 2 months after the company was founded and still with us today. He started as VP of finance, then eventually CFO, and now he's our president. We can talk about kind of what his role is what it means today. But for the most part, he is my yin to my yang. Everything I was terrible at or didn't want to do or wasn't good at, he loved. And vice versa, like all the sales and the meetings and the inspiration, all the visionary stuff that I loved, like that was not his thing. And so we paired up really well together. So he's not technically a co-founder, but he's pretty much, he joined really early on. He's got really good equity, and you can't be stingy with equity, especially in the early days. Like I think you have to let people win on that. I remember telling people I was gonna give this much equity to some of these early sales guys. Like, you're gonna give equity to sales. Like, it was like, they're gonna make commission. Like, why do they need equity? I was like, no, they don't understand. Like, they're building something special from the ground up, and this is really, really cool.
And it's like, you're going to give equity to investors, or you could give it to salespeople, right? And it's like, there's a trade-off, because the salespeople can go work, at some huge startup with tons of money and to get all these perks. And like, even though we know that like that's all BS and really doesn't matter, they don't know that, and they can sell that dream. So yeah, I think you need to level the playing field with the equity. And then they understand that, like, when they're coming to the office and maybe the elevator's broken, they got to walk up, 10 flights of stairs because we're bootstrapped. I'm not saying you did that, but like those little sacrifices along the way, they're like, take it with pride because they got the equity, and they almost want to be cheap because it's going to be better for their equity. So yeah, it aligns everyone's interests very nicely.
We had 9 people working out of my 1-bedroom apartment in East Village at one point. That was at its peak. And I just moved in with my girlfriend, now wife at the time. And we have these 9 dudes sharing a bathroom all day. And she was just like, one bathroom. And she's just like, enough got to enough. Eventually, we released another apartment in FiDi. So it was still another apartment, but it was just like DearDoc's actual apartment. And that was kind of our first official office until COVID hit, which that's a whole other story that we can get to later. But that was kind of how it started. It was like, just, I knew what I wanted, and I knew that I wanted to eventually start something. And I felt really passionate about it. And I just like sacrificed an unbelievable amount, not for like a crazy amount of time, for like a year and a half or so, like spent no money on anything. And that was kind of the initial money that got everything started.
Cool. So, all right. So Bootstrap. So I kind of assumed as much, and you kind of answered the second question, or you essentially did, but I want to make sure I've got the full answer. I was going to ask you, did you have a technical co-founder, or did you use outside agencies? You said you used agencies. Has that changed at all? Have you since brought in a technical co-founder, or are you still sort of outsourcing most of that?
So all of our engineering now is done in-house. We have a full engineering team now in-house. We have our head of engineering, his name's Tyler. He lives in Austin, Texas. He runs our whole engineering team. And yeah, it's been great. I mean, like, because like when you're dealing with the dev shop, for anyone that ever has to deal with it, like having to make edits or changes, and it's like, it's just now, like, if we need changes or things done within the product, it's like they do one sprint, it's done. Next sprint, like, this thing is done. Like, our product has gotten so much better, so much faster, because we have so much control over like what it is. And it's like made it possible to do a lot of really cool partnerships. So like, one of the things that DearDoc does is, like, you can think of DearDoc as, think about single platforms. So single platform was like menu management for restaurants. Your menu had to be everywhere because people are finding you everywhere. And it had to be on your menu, or your menu had to be on your website no matter what. Like, people are going to find your website, you have to put there. But then people are also going to find you on Google and TripAdvisor and Urban Spoon. Well, our same philosophy is this true. Like, we started with chat on a website, but then we said people are not just finding you on your website. They're going to find you on Google, and they're going to find you on WebMD and Healthgrades. And so now we've strategically partnered with all these other third-party publisher platforms to power all the patient conversations that happen on their site for this specific doctor's office. So you can actually schedule appointments through our AI chat product on Healthgrades, and it's matches all Healthgrades colors and fonts and everything like that. So that's been big for us. And that idea was started because, like, well, it was like a married idea between what we were doing and then also single platform.
Got it. Awesome. Makes a ton of sense. So the third question, I think we actually also kind of covered, but I'll see if you have anything you want to add. The question is, how did you refine your product market fit and ideal customer profile? We went through a bunch of that there, but were there any sort of big milestones or lessons learned along the way with the product, where any sort of big fails or big wins that you want to highlight?
For sure. I mean, so I don't know what it was, and maybe just my single platform DNA, where it's like, we're just going to, like, if you're a doctor's office, we're going to figure out a way to make it valuable for you, and we're going to sign you up. And I don't think that's a recipe for success. I think, like, you have to figure out who your ICP is, because there's certain customers that will just inherently going to be more successful. And so having to leave that mentality behind at some point in our ecosystem and say, okay, what is it that makes us successful customers? And I just jumped on the phone with, I would jump on the phone with 3 customers every quarter. And these are customers that have been with us for at least 3 to 4 or 5 years. And just ask them, and they were getting great results on the product, and ask them questions like, what makes you successful? I think a lot of times we focus on the customers that fail. So like, a lot of founders will like call, or people just start calling like customers that left, or like that are trying to leave, like, why are you looking to leave? And then they try to fix all the reasons that someone's trying to leave. But when you study your failed customers, it's kind of like trying to study people that have failed in life. If you want to be successful in life, you don't study the people that have failed, you study the people that are successful. And so I started studying our most successful customers and started seeing a commonality between them, and then really doing a deep dive on our data. because we had a lot of customers that were retaining and canceled, and identified, all right, that's your ICP. And one of those things in our ICP is like, cool, like we perform way better as a business if we integrate directly with the patient management system. So a lot of doctors want to use DearDoc when they have an EMR we don't integrate with a patient management system. Like, for all the ones that don't know, the healthcare side, it's like a CRM, the doctor's version of a CRM. If we don't integrate with that CRM, their version of it, the product will still work. It may not work as well. And the customers don't retain as long. And so those are just some of the few things. So we have 100 patient management systems today that we integrate with. And that's, we've been growing that number like almost every single month. That's been a big piece like our ICP. So you got to figure out I know this is, when you're early on and you're starting a company, like you just want to sign up all customers, and I think you should, because you don't know what's good or bad. I think 100% it's the right idea. Like sign up all customers you possibly can. At some point though, there's such thing as like bad revenue, like revenue that you sign up that's going to churn after 12 months after their contract's over. And just like, don't make the mistake I made. I waited way too long to like identify an ICP, and I wish I had done that. Like we knew this. We had the data. We had instincts on this. We didn't do a full analysis of it. I wish I had done that like in year 2 or year 3 of the business, than waiting till like year 5 to start really focusing on that. We would be in a way better spot than we are today if we did that earlier.
Yeah, I think I definitely had the same learning experience when I went to doctor.com, after SinglePlatform. Because what was, I think, unique about SinglePlatform is that it wasn't really being used by our customers, right? Like we would sort of set it up for them, and then it was just there, and it was really, the value was for their potential customers, right? Those are the people that would potentially use it. So there wasn't really a whole lot of like product engagement, and like that made it, I think, quite a bit easier for us to just sign up essentially anyone. Like if you owned a restaurant and you have a menu, you're qualified, right? But when it sounds like we both transitioned into like more in-depth, user-focused software after that. And we had similar learning experience where you start to realize, like, wait a minute, like we really need to make sure this thing's going to work out, or we could spend 3 months or 2 weeks or whatever closing the deal, and it just all turns out to be a waste of time and all that stuff. Especially, I would say, like in the early days, because you're probably sort of building feature requests and all sorts of stuff, and so you end up sort of bending over backwards for some people. And then did you sort of run into that where did you have to get disciplined at a certain point to say, like, this is what we offer, and we need to stop sort of like, customizing all these deals and sort of promising features? Did you have a phase like that?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I remember like being in my apartment, one of the sales guys put the customer on mute, and he goes, "This person wants a website." I'm like, "All right, we'll figure it out. We'll do it. We'll close the deal." "Yeah, okay, do it. And we'll figure it out." And like, "Oh yeah, we do websites." And then like, now we all started like a website company. And I was like, "Oh no, this is a disaster. Websites are like taking time to build, and people have all these, opinions on it." Now we do offer websites. Like today, we actually have a legitimate website team that builds unbelievable websites. They do such a great job. But in the early days, it was like, they wanted something, we'd say yes. Or if there was some type of feature they wanted, we'd say yes. And you have to learn, like, this is actually a big learning. When you're running a software company, I don't know where we found, this is what big learning for me was. I don't know if it's because I started in retail, is where I started I started doing like retail sales before I started SinglePlatform. And like you really obsess over like the customer being happy, and it's like kind of this like really customer service oriented type of mindset.
Same from CVS, yeah.
That's not actually how software companies should run in any way, shape, or form. Like,
right.
It doesn't matter the amount of flowers you send to a customer. Like, if the product doesn't work or they're not getting results from it, they will cancel. It doesn't matter if you give them a cookie on their birthday. It doesn't matter. Like, that stuff is nice and cool. And I'm not saying you shouldn't treat your customers well. That's just not what's going to retain customers. And for a long time, we thought that like making a customer happy, so adjusting the product in ways that like they wanted to, would have been actually valuable. It's actually not true. The opposite is actually true, in that like you need to hold stern and say, hold on a second. We work with like some of the most successful doctors, optometrists, dentists, whatever. This is how you actually drive the results you want to get. If we start altering this and changing it, it's going to alter the results you get out of the product. And therefore, this is actually the best way to do it. And you have to have your team hold strong on that. And so actually one of our core values, our first core value, is obsessing over customer results. It used to be actually customer obsessed, which is like kind of this buzzword you hear from Jeff Bezos, obsessed over the customer. And we had a lot of misunderstandings of what that word actually meant. People are like, we need to make the customer happy. Wait, why are we doing what the customer wants? And I was like, no, it doesn't matter what the customer wants, because they want to be successful. We had to change what that core value was. And now our whole team gets behind this idea, or they understand this idea now because we talk about it constantly, is we have to obsess over the customer's results, whatever's going to get them be successful with the product. It's called customer success for a reason. It's not called customer happiness for a reason. And so when you're focusing, we looked at our NPS surveys. When you ask customers on a scale of 0 to 10, How likely are people to, are you likely to recommend people to a friend or family to DearDoc? And people that scored us a 10 or a 0 stayed at the same rate. And so that's when I realized it didn't matter anymore how happy they were. What
Mm,
mattered was how many results were they getting out of the product. And so
yeah.
that was the big learning thing. And so if you're focusing on customer success, or if you're trying to fix your retention things, our retention has improved like unbelievably by shifting. It's like, what did we do? It's like our biggest shift was changing the culture of what like being customer obsessed means. It's not about falling over backwards for them. It's about like getting them the results they originally signed up and paid for.
I love that. And the Amazon example is huge. I think a lot of people misinterpret or maybe don't fully understand the context of what sort of Amazon's mission is. I mean, they bend over backwards for customers, right? They'll take your returns. I mean, you could send back, I mean, half the time you could probably send back an empty box and they'll just take it. And they know they're losing money along the way with all of these decisions, putting the customer first. But they're doing it for a very specific reason because and they will probably never acknowledge this, but they're on a mission to put retail out of business, right? Like they're on a mission to make it so that when you need to buy something, there's no question in your mind that the best and easiest way to do it is to go to Amazon. And so they know for the first like 20 or 30 years, or maybe even 50 years of their existence, they're going to lose a bunch of money. But it's going to change the way the world operates, and it's going to get us into a place where when we have to go buy something, and I'm in that place now with Amazon, even though there's a lot of evil and you can, complain about how they treat their employees and all this stuff. But because they do, they're willing to waste that money or lose that money or whatever to make the experience so good. It's really like, unless I can't buy something on Amazon, it's just the best way to do it, right? It's the fastest, it's the easiest. And if for whatever reason I'm not happy with it, like they take it back, And so like that's the cost of doing business for them. And the reason they can actually get away with it is because, and I know this from my CVS days, and I don't want to go too off track here, but the retail businesses, they have a massive cost center for pilferage, for theft. And that all gets baked into their prices. And so when you go into CVS to buy something, the reason it's expensive is because so many of them get stolen. Well, Amazon doesn't have that problem. So they can now deal with excessive returns and compete in ways that the other companies can't. And so, they have this whole mantra about putting the customer first. And it's right, because they basically want to change your shopping pattern forever. And in order to do that, they're going to waste a lot of money. Now, my guess, and I've been waiting for the day that this happens, is eventually it's going to become much more difficult to return things on Amazon. Eventually, they're going to be more strict because they will have taken over the world and you won't have choices at that point, or you're so programmed into making those decisions. So it is very different in software, right? Because, I mean, there's going to be competition, there's alternatives. You're not trying to necessarily, corner like an entire segment of the world like Amazon is. And so, yeah, you got to find the right customers. But I do agree with you, in the early days, like, get a bunch of people on there, see what happens, because even the unhappy ones may actually guide you toward, that right decision or that next product idea or something like that. But okay, cool. Let's dive into, so it's been 6 years, give or take, or you're past the 6-year mark at this point. Can you give us a sense of what the revenue growth sort of milestones have looked like where you're at today, and sort of some milestones along the way?
Yeah. And without getting like so many details, but
Yeah.
we mentioned we have 5,000 offices on the platform today. We grew new sales last year, grew 50% year over year. Our ARR grew 38% year over year.
And that's great 6 years in.
Yeah, I know. We hit a little bit of like a plateau for a little bit, and then last year was kind of like a really big growth spurt. It's interesting. So, and I think this is valuable for anybody, whether you're starting brand new. It's important to know that like all growth eventually will decay, and then you have to come up with new ideas to get there. It's kind of like, there's this great concept I learned called the elephant curve. If you type in on Google elephant curve, and I think there's a story about HubSpot and how they grew. And it's interesting because you think HubSpot and like you look at their growth and you're like, oh shit, like this is like some crazy growth they've had. But in reality, every single time they grew, they had to almost like reinvent themselves. So they released like this, like, they were CRM, and then they had to release like this like social media product that got them to like this next level. They had to release this other product, got to the next level, do this new marketing campaign, got to the next level. You have to constantly be like, as a founder, just as an executive team, as a leadership team, like you have to constantly be thinking about like you just because you're growing right now, that's not going to grow forever. You got to figure out what is the next, and while you're in that growth spurt and things are like, oh, it's not going to stay like that. You think it's going to stay like that forever. At least like if you're naive, you do. In reality, like the product that's selling unbelievably well will eventually decay. Or like the marketing campaign you're doing will eventually decay. The cold call script you have will work well, and eventually decay. And you got to keep coming with new stuff and new ideas to keep going to the next level.
Yeah.
I highly recommend looking up that article. If you're a founder and you're like with it, because one of the hardest things I've had to deal with as a founder is like, I've done personality tests, things like that. Like I'm a very quick start individual. Like I like to just like move. I don't like to like take a lot of time on things. And not everybody's that same way, especially even on your existing leadership team. Some people are going to be high. Like there's a great test called the Colby assessment where you can kind of see where people stand. And so there's some people that want to move a little bit slower. And I showed them this article. We read it through it together. And you can share it with your team. And like if your team's worried about like so much, why are we changing so much? It's like, this is why. Because if we don't, we're going to eventually just flatline and decay. We have to constantly be reinventing ourselves and doing new things.
It gets commoditized, and I feel like that's happening way faster in SaaS today.
For sure. Oh, I mean, it's crazy. And that's why you have to really figure out like what your moat is, right? Like everyone's got to figure out your moat, because like if you're,
and then keep refiguring it out, right?
Yes. And then, but then also it's like, because if you're just building like a software product and that's it, like you're going to be in a position where like someone can rebuild that with Claude in like a very short minute. Now, again, acquiring customers is not easy, and that can get difficult, especially if it requires having like, an outbound sales team like we have and those types of things. But figuring out like moats can be things like with integrations, moats can be things with certain partnerships, but figuring out like moats, I think is also really important as you're thinking about your long-term vision of your company, because it gets easier and easier to build products. And when it does, you got to figure out moats, I think, in other ways. That's valuable.
I would say, so it's interesting because healthcare on one hand, there's a lot of upside, right? Because it's sort of like what I was saying is like when you build relationships with the doctor's office, it sort of opens the door to solving a lot of additional problems for them because you become sort of their point person for technology. And so I imagine that a lot of the ideas you came up with were just through sort of them asking questions or experiencing problems. Is that sort of what has guided you towards finding some of those additional, products to layer in?
Yeah, it's a combination between that and also the idea of which doesn't always become true, but like the Henry Ford of, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have asked for a faster horse, but instead I got the car. So you have to you have to think about what's the problem they have, and what they're asking may not be the actual thing that's going to get them there. So you have to think sometimes like they're not even asking for it, and like you have to still figure out a way to deliver it, and then you just test it. You give it to the sales team. Do people buy it? Okay, cool. People are buying it now. Like, are they adopting it? Are they using it? Are they retaining because of that product? There's so many products people will buy, but like doesn't add value on the back end. People churn. And so we just like, we'll sunset those products. Even though technically people will buy them, it doesn't keep them long. And so there's right balance, because people always talk about like your ICP and focusing on like who's the most likely, like who's going to close the highest. What person closes the highest? That's not always the same person that's going to stay the longest. And I always suggest I suggest in the early days signing up everybody, because you just don't know. But once you have enough data, don't wait 5 years. Like once you have like enough data of customers that have left and stayed, like figure out what your ICP is just by looking at some data on like what were the things that the people that stayed have in common, and what are the people that left, what did they have in common, and stop signing up those people.
Bingo. Makes sense. So I think I understand what you're doing on the go-to-market side. Is it mostly outbound? What's the sales process look like? And has it evolved, or did you really just sort of nail it and stick with it?
It's a great question. Yeah, outbound is I love talking outbound, and I love talking outbound with someone that understands SinglePlatform and understands it well. Yeah, so we have an outbound sales team. We have about 50 people on the sales team today, and about 99 or 95% of our new business is all outbound, generated through our SDR team. So it's roughly a half 20 SDRs, 20 AEs, and then the rest are a couple managers and team leads, things like that.
And then do you pass it off to CSMs?
Yeah, so then we pass it off to an onboarding specialist who then gets them onboarded in 30 days or less, and then that goes over to a customer success manager. And customer success owns expansion. So I know in some organizations, I don't know if it should go to sales or should it stay in sales, should it go wherever. We have our CSMs do expansion. They're in charge of expansion, they're in charge of logo retention, and they're in charge of one of the other big parts of their components is getting their book of businesses integrated directly into their patient management system. Because once that's done, it makes the product way more valuable for our customers.
Do you find that I'm just curious because I'm thinking back to my doctor.com days with the CSM piece, do you find that you're bringing salespeople back into the conversation to expand often, or have you sort of been able to figure out how to have an actual handoff?
For the longest time, I was trying to figure out how you get like CSMs to want to sell and want to expand. Because a lot of CSMs are like, I sign up for this so I don't have to sell. Like, I don't want to be doing selling.
Oftentimes they were not good at selling and they move into the role, right? Because they were just more friendly. Yeah.
So when we started kind of going after this initiative, that was kind of the mindset. What's interesting about this, I've now seen this at too many companies. So I think this is 100% true and real, I think, across the board, unless, maybe I'd say 90% of the time, customers who expand stay longer. So like our customers who expand stay like 2 to 3 times longer. So we first started expanding customers. We thought, oh, this is a great net revenue retention play. But I stopped looking at it that way. I looked at it like, oh, if a customer expands and gets, adopts a new product or feature, they actually stay 2 to 3 times longer. So it's just about the number of expansions is actually more valuable to me versus like how much did you expand in a quarter or a month. But how do you get them to do it? It's actually way simpler. When you're like, I think we overcomplicate things as like sales leaders, because obviously that was my background before this. I'm like, all right, so you got to use this script and this technique and this thing, and we kind of overcomplicate it because I think you do have to do that because our whole sales process there's scripting for our entire sales process here at DearDoc, very similar to SinglePlatform, the cold call script, the pitch, everything. It's all done relatively on the OCC model.
But a lot more dynamic thinking than SinglePlatform, right?
It is
like a lot more fill in the blanks, I would imagine.
A lot more, and the pitches are like the average pitch for us is like, I'd say the average close is an hour and 20 minutes, where at SinglePlatform it was like 20 minutes, so it's definitely a little bit longer.
Yeah. But that was an adjustment for me when I left there. I mean, I've always scripted everything, but SinglePlatform was the most scripted process because it was just I don't want to say, or it was simple. It wasn't easy, but it was a simple process.
Well, I watched Wiley's episode here, and even Wiley was like, his fanaticism with scripts is like, he wrote a script when they were selling SinglePlatform, and he had a script for every single person on the team. He's like, here's what to say, here's what not to, like, here's the exact word by word. So we definitely lean on, we are definitely heavily, we think scripts are great. And the reason I think scripts are great, and actually Wiley mentioned this in your podcast with him, was like, it's the same idea when you go to Amazon. If you go to Amazon, you don't see, like, if I go to Amazon and my friend goes to Amazon at the same time, we're looking at the product at the same time, we're not going to see totally different pages. Like, we're going to see the buy now button's going to be in the same place. The rating's going to be in the same place. The suggested product's going to be in the same place. Why is that? Well, it's because they've optimized that website to be the highest converting. So why would you try to, if you know the best optimized way for a web page to be high converting, why not have your sales presentation be completely optimized to the most highest converting? And then as things improve, people adjust things, because not everyone stays on script. Then you say, oh, that's working well. Let's actually update the script and update the process. Well, now we can be super, super aligned on that. But yeah, I think we're probably one of the few sales organizations that are like, I think in 2025, that are like a very, very script heavy. But to go back to the question about CSMs and expanding, I think it's way simpler. I think it's just like, hey, doc, hey, customer A, like, you are getting this many results out of the product today. And I know if you want to get to this much results, if you want to increase results by X 20%, I can help you do that. But we just need to make sure we adopt this part of the product. So if you're willing to do, if we want to get your results from this to this, we have to make sure we adopt this. And it's only $100 to do so. Would you like to adopt it? Sure. Okay, great. Like, it is like, and I may just be like, it may sound too simple to people like hearing this. And it is, when you're dealing with existing customers, they already trust you. You've already gotten them results already. It is so much easier than I was trying to put together like all these decks and presentations for our CS team to try to expand the product. And no, it's like, you want to go from here to here? Cool. We just need this.
Yeah. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
It's like an opt-in kind of decision.
It's crazy how once we simplified it and made it that easy, like January was we had the most expansion. We did more expansions in January than we did in all of like 2023, the whole year, just because we've simplified it and a lot of things like that.
Cool. So you gave me a good sense of the size of the team. How do you think about headcount planning? And this is where it's going to overlap a little bit into some of those other topics. I'm curious, as we talk about growth at all cost, all this type of stuff, and how hiring works in those types of companies is it's generally more linked to, we want to sort of paint the picture that like, we're going to hire more people, we're going to grow faster. And in a lot of SaaS companies, it's not the case anymore because hiring heads just doesn't necessarily equate to growth. However, I'm thinking maybe for your company, it might actually still be somewhat in that realm because you can be very outbound focused. You probably are in a situation where, or I guess you split off into SDRs and AEs, but there's such a tremendous market size and it's very transactional that you may actually be in a situation where you haven't hit that point yet where like if you bring on more people, you're literally going to keep growing. Have you hit that point yet where you bring on more people and you're like, now we're not growing. Now it's getting harder? Because that's what I see happen in these growth at all cost companies. But there are rare exceptions to that, like a single platform or perhaps even what you're doing, just because it's so transactional, it's so SMB, there's so many that you can go after, and sort of an easy decision type of sign up where in those situations, I think you probably can get away with like adding headcount for growth, at least to a certain point. But what's been your experience there? And sort of how are you thinking about that, going forward?
Yeah, I wish it was true. We tried it. Like it's not
Okay,
100%.
so it's I was wishful thinking there. I wasn't. I didn't want to like rain on your parade if it was the
Yeah.
case.
No, we've tried, like we've seen it, and it's more headcount doesn't equal more sales, right? That's not unfortunately that
Yeah,
you think it does. It makes
for a
sense.
little while it does, right?
Sure, for sure, for
Yeah,
little ones, but it's
yeah.
not always true. You got to optimize the team that you have. You got to make sure you're constantly training and developing the team that you have. You have to keep coming up with new ideas, right? If
Mm.
you're like us, where you're heavily relying on cold calls, you have to be updating what your team is saying on a very regular basis. At Single Platform, we were using the same cold call script for like half a decade, and it was like
Yeah.
working just fine, and nothing, didn't have to change anything. But nowadays, at least for us here, like we have to constantly be like every period of time, we have to come up with a new, it's just like a marketing. I look at cold calling as like a marketing campaign. It's just like a cold call will work up until a certain point, and then you just got to become creative and think of a new one. You're constantly always like way before you ever need to, where a cold call becomes less effective, you're constantly thinking of the new one. And then you're also constantly coming with new product ideas. And I still believe in the single platform. Like if we can sell it, then we'll build it. And so I love the concept of like, instead of like, if we build it, they will come. I don't think that's right. And so we'll come up just like, I remember Kenny talking about this a lot where he's like, I'm really good at PowerPoint. I actually talked to him recently. He's like, now he's really good at Figma, which like able to create like product ideas. But
Yeah.
so you're really good with PowerPoint. You showcase like, here's what the product would look like. And then you actually get to the point where you tell the customer it exists, and then like see if they actually take out their wallet and actually pay for it. And then when you have enough people like actually like reading their credit card to pay for it, do you actually say, all right, we're going to take the resources to start developing and building this? I think that's very valuable. So I think it's because you don't spend a bunch of money on resources and engineering work. Like, we have so much stuff we want to do, and we have such a limited amount of people to be able to do it. And so if customers will buy it, then we'll build it. And I think that's a good thing to think about. I don't know, I got a little lost in what the question was, but
No, it's fine. That does helpful. What I'm trying to ask, and that was, I mean, that's valuable anyway to know. But I guess maybe let me reframe it a little bit, like I've framed the questions before. Is I'm trying to get a sense of like sort of quota and headcount capacity, and like how you make a decision to add more salespeople.
right.
Are you looking at sort of like the capacity of the salespeople and saying, hey, we're way too busy, we have too many demos in the schedule, it's time to add some sellers? Or are you looking at your revenue and saying, we need to sort of up these numbers? Like, how do you decide when to add more salespeople? Or maybe you're not now. Maybe you've just sort of added them as needed, and now you're sort of at the right size team. How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, we model out, like we do a model of like, all right, here's the revenue we want to bring in for 2025, 2026, 2027, and here's kind of what that looks like. And we kind of have the, you budget in like, that what that revenue each rep will bring in on average. But again, like these like models never turn out to be exactly, or maybe like we need to get better at them, but they never turn out exactly how you want them to be.
They never do. Yeah.
So like we're like last year we hired new SDRs almost every month, or like at least every other month we were hiring new SDRs. But these were small classes, like maybe 3 people or so. We just on Monday, so 2 days ago, we hired a class of 4 SDRs. So we're still growing the team, and all of our AEs at this point, 100% of them were all at like SDRs at one point. We've got promoted and become AEs. So we have been like
Nice.
promoting from within. And
Are they generally hitting quota?
yeah, last month we had 110%. We've hit over 100% every month for almost definitely for the last 6 months, if not much longer. They're hitting over percent. But that's one of the things that you and I share is like a lot of companies will set really high quotas and want people to hit them, and we will set a little bit lower quotas.
Yeah.
I don't know if our sales team would totally agree that it's a lower quota, but it's a lower quota, and that like I think they are capable of. So we are able to make sure that people overperform. And when you're on a winning team, it just feels so much better. And so I agree with your philosophy on that a lot. Is set goals that people can hit and overachieve is super valuable. It builds a lot of
It's
confidence.
Dude, the momentum is it's unmatched, man. Like when I see people just pushing these quotas up and up and up, I'm just like I just see it as like you're just literally bringing down the motivation of the team. You're bringing down their excitement to be on the team. You're adding pressure to them. No one works better. Like you do not sell better under pressure. Anyone who says that they do is completely full of crap. Like when you are under real true pressure, you're not a better salesperson. Like you're going to be aggressive, you're going to be in a bad mood, you're not going to be as friendly. Like the vibes are different.
Yeah.
I've gotten a little bit into all this spiritual research and stuff. And like, they say there's an energy field like around your body. And I think that changes based on the moods you're in. And people can literally feel that. And when you're talking to a salesperson who you can just tell is crushing it, there's an energy that like you just want to sort of be on that train. You want to be on that call. But you can also tell when a salesperson's frustrated, they're losing their cool, they're really annoyed. It comes off in everything they say and all their emails and all their phone calls. And when you have a whole team like that, it's like just pick team A or team B. Like which one do you want? Like you clearly want the team that's in that headspace of like we're crushing it, we're winning. And if that means a 20% lower quota, it's gonna make up for it in spades. And even if you bring the OTE down, like maybe you just say like, and the numbers come out the same, but the mental advantage is huge. Actually, I wanted to follow up on that. Now that you guys have gotten past sort of your initial bootstrap phase, have you added in base salaries and like health benefits and stuff like that?
Yeah, we did that like even within months. So like it was only the first two salespeople that were like commission only. Every other person we hired after, or maybe the first three or four. But then after that, everyone had a base salary, and it was very similar to SinglePlatform's model with base salaries and pay. We modeled a lot of our comp plan against SinglePlatform. What we did at SinglePlatform and Simplifeye.
How nerve-wracking was that for you? The reason I ask is because I've had, ever since I'll just use my consulting business as an example. Like I have a ton of demand because of the following on LinkedIn. It's more demand than I can generally handle. And so I've gone through like that phase of like, do I want to hire people and like teach them how to do a lot of this stuff and manage that? And I think one of the main things, I mean, consulting's different just because you can't replicate yourself, but I mean, you kind of can, but you also kind of can't. But one of the things that sort of held me back is just like I really like the freedom of like not having to worry about making payroll, right? Did you go through a period or do you still where it's like I imagine in the beginning, now you've got the revenue to support it, but to make those first initial decisions to go from that like commission only where you're really safe to like I'm committing to making these payments or now I'm buying healthcare for these people, like were there some rocky roads there? How did you make that jump? Like it's nerve wracking, right? Because it's a lot of pressure. You literally, once you commit to someone that they're going to receive a paycheck, but like when it comes time to pay those bills, like I know of a lot of entrepreneurs, it's terrifying, right? And sometimes they're not going to pay themselves because they got to pay the people. And like, was it smooth sailing because sales supported it, or did you go through a rough period at all?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's if anyone tells you it's smooth sailing all the time, and they'd be lying, right? I think
Yeah.
that's not the case at all. I would say just having I have a lot of faith, and I think it's like the difference between fear and faith, and the two opposite emotions, like having the fear of it versus having just faith that it's going to work out, going to figure out these people are going to add value, they're
Yeah.
going to pay for themselves. And we had to the point where like we had salespeople paying for themselves relatively quickly. I mean, they would. An account executive here with like that has SDR support, their quota is like 57,000 in ARR. And so like, and they pay for themselves pretty quickly. Like we'd have like a payback period of like 3 months, 4 months, and people would like end up paying for themselves. So like we had it really good set up. And yeah, like I think having those commission only salespeople in the beginning and being able to like drive revenue in the early days was helpful, but I felt confident. I had my VP of finance at the time, now our president, like we were modeling it out. We had everything in place. I trusted him. That's another big thing. It's like when you work with people you really trust, it's like a game changer. And like me and him have known each other for 14 years before we even started this together. So I think that's really valuable. But yeah, of course I felt that emotion, and you just have to have faith that it's all going to work out. They're going to add, like, if you're hiring them, the ideal, they're going to add value, and they're going to figure out a way. And if not adding value, then like you have to have a conversation with them about like, hey, we need to get this value, or like this can't be a partnership anymore, right? We can't work together at the company together. And people do that. My CFO, so my VP finance who I joined, in his offer letter, it actually said, you will be paid nothing for the first 90 days. And then by day 90, we will determine what your pay will be based on where the company is. and he signed. Like, it is actually one of those, he had a very high paying job. He has an MBA from USC. Like, the guy had everything going for him, and he freaking signs this offer with no guarantee pay at any point. And
This was your CFO?
this was my VP of finance I brought on. He was VP of finance when he started, then was CFO, and now he's my president. And so the way that our roles work from CEO to president is like I focus on long-term vision, culture, R&D, product stuff, like new ideas, and he's focused on like making sure our leadership team, our executive team, executes on their scorecards, their weekly numbers, quarterly numbers, all those things, their quarterly objectives, their rocks, their OKRs, all that stuff. And that's how this works. But that's so I definitely have felt it before, and you just have to like just have faith that it will work out. And if you hire the right people, it will.
Awesome. What does the future look like for you guys? What are the big plans for the coming year?
We have big numbers. We want to like grow revenue, at least new revenue, like 33% this year. We have like some really cool products. One of the things we're working on that we're launching very soon is a voice product. So what we're building is we could only connect the dots looking backward instead of forward. Is we are building really the first AI patient coordinator that does a lot of different things for these doctors' offices. And
I was going to say AI must be on the roadmap for what you're doing.
We've been using AI for a lot of our products for many years. And obviously when OpenAI and all these things came out, it made it obviously significantly easier to get a lot of these things done.
Yeah.
But for sure, like one of the products we have is a voice product where we're going to be managing the doctors like their phone calls. And I think we can convert at a higher rate based on our like training of our what we know to convert new patient phone calls into leads. But we want to keep helping. And our mission really is to help we're focused primarily on SMB. Like we love SMB. That's like our main focus. We want to help a lot of these SMB, these independent doctors, like compete and win against a lot of these like chain corporate healthcare spots. And so if we can give them the tools and things they need to be successful, I think we're going to be really in a good spot. But the focus is hiring great salespeople. So if anyone that's listening to this and wants to join a fast growing company that's in the healthcare space, like we are hiring salespeople 100%. Hit us up, hit me up on Instagram, all these other places.
Are you hiring for both roles, SDR and AE?
Yeah. Oh yeah. SDRs and AEs.
Oh, so you do bring in AEs from outside as well as promoting some. You do a mix of both.
We will. We like people starting out on the SDR side. We will be open to that conversation. We'll talk to AEs, and if they're the right fit, for sure, we'll figure out a way to make it work. But definitely SDRs too. And if you have no sales experience, don't even worry about it. If you're interested in sales, hit us up. Very similar to SinglePlatform. We're going to give you all the training, and a lot of the training that we learned at SinglePlatform is a lot of the training these guys are getting at
nice.
DearDoc.
Yeah, a lot of it translates right over cold calling doctors' offices. Awesome. Yeah. I'm curious, just how did you come to the 33% rev growth? You said you were at like 50 last year. Are you? Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you're not being pressured by boards and investors to hit like certain sort of cookie cutter numbers. So are you just being realistic? Like you're looking at, sort of how you're trending and you put a little ambition on top of that. And, I mean, that's the right way to set a target, but unfortunately most companies don't have the luxury of doing that.
Yeah. So we don't like have, we don't have a board. We don't have investors that are telling us that we have to grow at a certain number, these types of things. We want to set numbers that we want to be good at predicting, and we're trying to get better at predicting. So we can predict that, like we predicted that we would have done 33% this year. We did 50, that's what we end up predicting. We overshot what our goal was. And I think that's always better. Like, I think it's the same concept, like let alone just for the sales team, but also the whole company. And so
what you just said highlights one of the major advantages of Bootstrap. You set your target at 33, you hit 50. Now you're going into the next year, and what a VC would do is they would say your target's 60 next year, right? Like they would not say we're doing 33% again. Let's crush it and hit 50. But that sounds like a great thing. Like we just had a great year. Let's repeat it. Right? Let's just do that again. That sounds great. Yeah.
Growing if you go 33% every year for 3 years, you're doubling in 3 years. And if I know some people need to double faster because of the money they've raised and the expectations set from investors. I know that's not, but to double every 3 years, I don't think it's a bad thing either. If your business is growing, you're doing those things, you're going to have fun in the process. You'll grow the right way. You're not going to grow at all costs, spending a bunch of money that you don't actually have, and then be in a cash situation. So yeah, we want to build something that's fun, that feels different than working at other venture-backed companies where that was another issue I had with some venture-backed. It was like, we had decisions being made on the company, people getting either let go, whatever it was. And it was, by the board who weren't in it every day. Like they saw the company once every 3 months, making these calls and decisions. It's like, no, if we're gonna make decisions that are impact the organization, it's gonna be from people that are inside the organization who understand what's going on day to day. And I think that's really valuable. Not saying that all investors are bad. I think there's tons of great ones. And I've talked to Wiley about this many times. He's he has some really good relationships, some really good investors. I've just unfortunately been tainted a little bit on the other side.
I
So
don't blame you, man. If you can make it work without it, all the more power to you. And even if you can just get through, like now you could take some VC capital if you wanted to, and it wouldn't be nearly as much of a golden handcuff situation as if you did it earlier, right? Because you have the momentum, you have traction, you don't need to give up as big of a piece of the pie because you got through that hardest phase. Like for those who are listening, you're going to give up the biggest chunks of pie earlier. The earlier you're raising money, the bigger piece they're taking for a smaller amount of money too.
yeah,
Right. So if you can even just get to the point, of having paying customers before raising capital, you'll be in a better situation. But you guys you're in control of your own destiny. Nothing's going to stop you. And you've got the luxury of being able to make the right decisions for your employees, for your customers, because there's no one who sits above that in the priority lane, right? Whereas if you've got venture capitalists, who gave you 20 or 100 million bucks, like you're making decisions for them at the end of the day. So
one thing I would also mention on this too, like I think having a board, there is value to having a board if you bring on people that like have done it before and understand it. You can bounce ideas off of. But what we've done is we've brought on some really, really incredible advisors. And so that's been extremely helpful for me and for our leadership team as they're like trying to like maneuver through things. So we have advisors that work with our leadership team and myself, and that's been almost like our mini board of like at least giving us advice for making big decisions. They can talk through it with them. And so I highly suggest if there's I'm sure people would be willing to do it, open to do it. I'm just like, hey, will you be an advisor and meet with me, maybe once every couple weeks, and we can shoot ideas through. I can send you just text messages on certain ideas, and people are more open and willing to that than I think you may think.
yep.
So that's
especially throw them a little equity or something like, yeah, people will jump on board. I mean, I sit on a bunch of advisory boards and yeah, they provide so much more value than, like there's board of investors and there's board of advisors. A board of advisors is highly valuable. Everyone should have that.
Yes.
Ideally, your board of investors actually are good advisors. And I think that was the intention back in the day, but it's turned into just venture capitalists are just, that's what they do. They're like professional business gamblers and that's it. Like they're not necessarily operators. And so, yeah, you're going to get some cloudy advice sometimes, but look, man, so proud of you. So happy to see all your success. Wishing you nothing but the best. Everyone can follow you on LinkedIn, on Twitter or X as well. And then your website is getdeardoc.com. And I imagine you've got all your job postings and stuff on the website and LinkedIn as well.
Right. Yeah. Just go to there's a bottom, you'll see careers, click it. You'll see all the opening positions, and look forward to hearing from anybody that's interested in learning more. And yeah, DM me on LinkedIn, Instagram. And Instagram is This Is Joe Brown. Excited.
Same as the X as well, right? This is Joe Brown. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Joe, thanks so much for joining me. We'll have to catch up again soon sometime.
Sounds good.